Welcome to the final episode of the History of Pinups. We left off at the end of the 80s, and with a mere 30 hectic years between that point and today, it's time we wrap everything up in a finale. Buckle up, because covering the history of the data revolution is going to bring us face to face with the wild reality that is the internet. This historic video series is brought to you by the Historic Autographs Company. You can find trading cards and relics related to the history explored here on our website, link in the description. Check out our product Chaos for cards about the wild world we live in, serial killers, true crime, disasters, tragedies, and hope. Thanks for watching, and remember to like and subscribe for more content. Episode 7, The Death of Modesty. Okay. Disclaimer. It's really easy to point to any time in history and say, I guess modesty is dead, or chivalry, or integrity, etc. It's just part of generational divide, and it's completely natural. But in this case, the sensational title is at least a little warranted, because the internet changed a lot of things profoundly for humanity, including what this series is about. And since the introduction of the internet, the world has been rocked on its axis with the potential it holds. Computational technology has been the backbone of mankind's industry since Mesopotamia. Systems that log, store, access, and compute data are what have allowed humanities to expand in massive cooperative enterprises to produce enough to meet the needs of humanity and then some. Computers are a big deal, and starting in 1991 with the introduction of the World Wide Web, their capabilities would start evolving at a staggering pace. The internet could connect all those computers and allow them to share information across great distances. Eventually, this would turn into what we have today, where the digital world feels at times more important than the real world. But in the 90s, we had no way of knowing that. As for pinups, we've got a lot to cover. In the 80s, pinups were still brought to the masses in the forms of posters, calendars, and magazines. Print. Their distribution was through stores and sometimes TV advertisements, where you could put it in order and have it mailed to you. Even with the pressure from various groups keeping them clean, the business was largely stable. But that would change, thanks to something I'm not sure we can talk about on YouTube. But here we go, gonna try and keep things as above board as possible. Even way back in the Gilded Age, which we talked about in the first video in this series, there was pornography. It looked way different than it does today, enough that we could put it in the video, because what was raunchy then is safe for work today. But it existed, just not in a widely available format. It existed since then, too, but it was very much not above board, and a lot of people would never interact with it, having no way nor a desire to. You had to own and know how to operate a camera, and then be brave enough to pose in your skivvies. Later on, there were also sex tapes, no way to sugarcoat it. But like those Victorian pinups, they weren't widely available. Pinups became the first widely available form of erotic content, backed by companies and consumers, as the 20th century became the grounds for massive social change. The sexual revolution in the 60s and 70s saw a lot of people opening up to the idea of recognizing that sexual content existed, and some people were even okay with the idea, at least to some degree. But nothing could prepare people for what the internet made possible. 2 words. Internet pornography. 2 words would forever overshadow the pinup industry. At least by today's standards, the pinups we've been talking about have not been truly 100% explicit. They've been censored, with a combination of skimpy clothing, scene props, somewhat unnatural poses, etc., such that full nudity was uncommon and apparently discouraged. But, okay, we really need a quick sidebar. Nudity existed in art and in off-market erotic art, but not in mass-produced, publicly available magazines and such, because of social standards. This distinction is what most easily delineates between pinups and porn, because before the internet, the pinup industry was the erotic content industry, the closest you could get. And even today, same thing, you can't buy porn off the checkout rack at a Target. Forced or otherwise, the modesty limitations of pinups result in the core aspect of them being intrigue and leaving things to the imagination. The intrigue means pinups are considered by some a legitimate artistic pursuit, making more use of aesthetic appeal of bodies rather than sexual, leaning more towards art than towards porn. Obviously, it's not so black and white, but opinions differ, and it's not necessarily an outlandish statement that pinups are not pornography, at least not always, like squares and rectangles. This is all to say that internet pornography becomes a different beast. It's not beholden to industry standards and laws and pressure from society. It's the Wild West, unregulated, anonymous. You could now find a website and download an intangible and seemingly untraceable bit of content that you could remove from existence completely, all without having to interact with another living being. People were no longer limited in where they could see that sort of thing. You didn't need to mail a letter to a pinup company or find a red light district to physically travel to. So, needless to say, it was very popular. Whatever you looked for, you could probably find in abundance, no matter how niche. The internet didn't kill pinups, but it did kill the innocence of a lot of computer owners. So, now we've got pinups competing with pornography for attention in the adult entertainment industry. They're different things, playing by different rules, but they are related. For a long time, pinups played the role that pornography plays now, so when the new frontier of the internet provided a space for adult content to dive off the proverbial deep end, these two competing kinds of content naturally moved and carved out separate niches. Pinups would stay in magazines and continued to be produced, but by the end of the 90s, the identity had evolved a little, or perhaps just became clearer in comparison to the relatively untamed and indulgent NSFW explosion. The new definition would hold up through today. Pinups are generally viewed as an art form, one that explores eroticism and, more importantly, intrigue. People seeking just the raw, explicit content have near infinite amount of options, but what defines a pinup rather than a nude is the production quality, bluntly. Pinups are classy, old-fashioned. They could show everything or nothing, but the end goal is for it to be a well-composed shot with artistic flair. So, let's take a step back and look at what has gone down since the creation of pinups. World War II fostered an association between pinups and home. They became symbols sold in magazines. In the 50s and 60s, that symbol held strong and was used to sell products of all kinds, in addition to the reign of men's magazines and the popularity of pinup stars. Then in the 70s and 80s, the art style faded in popularity in favor of photography, and interest groups pushed for more modesty and public-facing content. In the 90s, the internet happened. Men's magazines still exist, and pinups are still made. That's still true today. They've moved online with everything else. Pinups can come in the form of drawn and photographed commissions by artists building their own small businesses on sites like Patreon, or mass-produced by companies who hire artists and models. Case in point, our company just made our own to sell as collectibles. But specifically when it comes to the artistic expression, it's now all just homage. The art style is locked in the past as its own movement. Art made today mimicking Vargas's work totally still happens. You can find oodles of it in classic calendars and retro diners. But it's all recreations and reimaginings of the bygone form, just like other art movements. And after all these years, pinup is not an overly specific term, at least not without spending entirely too much time reading and writing about them. Pinups can refer to a lot of slightly different forms of art and photography going back as long as photography has existed. In this writer's personal opinion, what makes pinups and their history interesting is the social change in the 20th century that pinups affected and were affected by. The sheer expanding momentum of the century, the wars, the depression, the data revolution, gave women the opportunity to fight for financial and social independence. We've already covered bits and pieces of this, but now that we have the full picture. Throughout a good chunk of Western history, women's place in society was static. Women were raised and taught to be housewives, and only housewives. Their assigned goal from birth was to marry, preferably to someone richer than you currently were, and have kids. Women that attempted or achieved anything else were outcast, generally. Singular voices like Mary Wollstonecraft spoke and wrote on such matters as early as the 1700s, but it wasn't until the 20th century that women started to make significant progress. And pinups are part of that. Pinup modeling became a new thing women could do, and any one career was a welcome addition when the list consisted of only actress, seamstress, secretary, nurse, teacher, or homemaker. Not only that, but pinups became an avenue in society for women to be valued for implicit beauty, for existing, and as they reached a wider and wider audience, that helped give women a voice. Now, when I said interesting, I meant it in the neutral sense. At the same time, pinups did introduce negative pressure, foremost being beauty standards, which were often reliant on dozens of expensive, trendy products that changed month by month, and the balance of is this a positive icon or an oppressive standard is still a question among feminists. It's a complicated topic. But there's good news for pinups. While the application changed slightly over time, pinups are an art form, and that means they can be used to express ideas. And just as pinups once broke down barriers when it came to women's strictly modest social dress code, they've since been used to further break down other barriers of what women are allowed to be. In 1992, Demi Moore shocked America with her cover of Vanity Fair, in which she posed naked and pregnant. Since, if you think about it, it's a double standard that women are meant to be flawlessly attractive for their husbands, so they can get pregnant and immediately cease to be attractive in the eyes of society. Demi Moore used pinups to express that pregnancy shouldn't be a taboo thing, that women's bodies include the pregnancy part. Similar strides have been made regarding the glass ceiling in regards to age, where models cease being viewed as attractive as soon as they're middle-aged. In conclusion, the 20th century was a wild time. Technological, social, political, and industrial upheaval paved the way for a lot of things. Among them, a raunchy and controversial product that would become a symbol of hope during World War II and a hotly debated industry thereafter. But through the highs and lows, pros and cons, popularity and scorn, pinups persisted as a unique and intriguing art form that reflected the turbulent social landscape of the time. That's all, and thanks for watching. I, the writer, would like to thank you on behalf of Historic Autographs for tuning into our web series, and we hope you stick around and check out the other series we have coming up after this one. Remember to like and subscribe, and comment if you have any feedback. Also check out our website for Historic Autographs trading card sets, including authentic relics, autographs, and yes, even our own pinups.